The millionaire's son couldn't see until a girl removed something from his eye. Julian Sterling viewed the world through thick lenses that distorted everything around him, turning each day into a silent battle against his own vision. At 8 years old, the boy had already been through dozens of appointments with the best specialists in New York City, but no one could explain why his eyes didn't improve, even with the most expensive glasses on the market. It was on a Sunday afternoon during a forced stroll through the town square of Aspen that everything changed. A girl with dark hair and simple clothes approached him while his father was on the phone talking business. Without warning, she gently touched Julian's face and whispered something that made his heart race. "There's something shiny in your left eye," said the girl, with a seriousness that didn't match her 9 years. "It looks like it shouldn't be there." Julian felt a shiver. No one had ever noticed what he had felt for years. A strange sensation, as if something small was scratching his eye from the inside. He always thought it was normal, part of the problem the doctors couldn't solve. "What are you talking about?" asked Julian, lowering his voice so his father wouldn't hear. "My grandma taught me to observe eyes. She had similar problems when she was young. There's something stuck there, really tiny, but I can see it." Harrison Sterling, Julian's father, noticed the approach and immediately ended the call. A 45-year-old man, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his son's life, he approached with firm steps and a severe expression. "Julian, get away from that girl right now," he ordered, grabbing the boy by the arm. "Dad, she said she saw something in my eye," Julian tried to explain but was ignored. "Girl, get out of here. Don't approach my son again," Harrison said harshly, staring at the girl with disdain. The girl wasn't intimidated. She looked directly at Harrison and repeated her words with conviction. "Sir, your son has something tiny stuck to the cornea of his left eye. That's why he can't see properly. Glasses won't fix that." Harrison laughed with irony, but something in that child's certainty bothered him. How could a poor girl know something the best ophthalmologists in the country hadn't discovered? "And you're a doctor, are you?" he asked sarcastically. "No, but I take care of my grandma. She had the same thing, only in her right eye. A tiny piece of glass that got stuck when she was a child. It took years for anyone to see it." Julian felt something stir inside him. That description made sense. He always had the feeling that something small was interfering with his vision, especially when he blinked. "How do you know it's in the left eye?" asked Julian, ignoring his father's impatient gestures. "Because you blink that eye more. And when you look up, it seems like you're trying to get something out." The precision of the observation left Julian speechless. That was exactly what he did, an unconscious habit he hadn't even noticed himself. Harrison, seeing his son's interest, grew annoyed. "Enough of this ridiculous talk. Julian, let's go. This girl is trying to fool us." "But Dad—" No discussion. When they got home, Julian couldn't stop thinking about the girl's words. The Sterling estate, located high in Aspen, had always been a silent and formal place, but that night it seemed even emptier. Beatrice, the housekeeper who had cared for Julian since he was little, noticed the boy was quieter than usual during dinner. "Did something happen today, Julian?" she asked while serving his plate. Julian looked at his father, who was focused on his documents, and decided to tell Beatrice about the encounter in the square. The 52-year-old woman, who had always had a special affection for the boy, listened attentively. "You know, Julian, I always thought it was strange your glasses never improved your vision. Maybe that girl is right." "You think so, ma'am?" "I think it's worth finding out. Sometimes the simplest people see things that the doctors can't see." Harrison looked up from his papers and stared at Beatrice with disapproval. "Beatrice, don't fill the boy's head with this nonsense. He's already been to 20 different doctors. With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, but in 20 appointments, no one really looked properly at his problem. Maybe it's time to try something different." "I don't want to hear any more of this talk in my house," Harrison ended the matter firmly. In the following days, Julian began to pay more attention to his own vision. He noticed that he really did blink his left eye more frequently, and that there were moments when he felt as if something were moving inside his eye. His curiosity grew with each day, and Julian found himself constantly thinking about that girl. Who was she? Where did she live? Why did she know so much about eyes? Beatrice, noticing the boy's anxiety, decided to help him secretly. "Julian, if you want, I can try to find out where that girl lives. Maybe it would be good to talk to her again." "You would do that?" "I would. You deserve to understand what's happening to you." For 3 days, Beatrice asked discreet questions around town. Aspen wasn't a very big town, and it wasn't long before she discovered the girl's name was Maya, and that she lived with her grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn, in a small mobile home on the outskirts of town. "I found her, Julian. Her name is Maya. She lives with her grandmother in a mobile home on the road to Glenwood Springs. Can you take me there?" "I can't. Your father would fire me on the spot. But I can give you the address." That night, while Harrison worked in his office, Julian made a decision that would change his life forever. He had never left the house alone, had never disobeyed his father so seriously, but something inside him said he needed to find Maya. For the first time in his life, Julian snuck out of the estate. The walk to the mobile home was harder than he imagined. Used to being driven everywhere, Julian hadn't calculated the distance. It took almost 2 hours of walking before he found the small white mobile home parked in an area with 3 or 4 other families. When Maya saw him approaching, she ran outside. "You came," she said, with a genuine smile. "I knew you'd want to know the truth." "My father wouldn't let me come here," Julian confessed. "Rich parents are like that. They think they know everything. How did you learn to see those things in people's eyes?" "Come on, I'll show you." Maya led him inside the mobile home, where a white-haired woman was sewing by hand on an old machine. "Grandma, this is the boy I told you about." Mrs. Evelyn looked up and smiled warmly at Julian. She was a 68-year-old woman with wrinkles that told stories of a simple but full life. "Hello, dear. Maya told me about you. Come here, let me see that eye." "You understand this?" "Yes, I do. I went through the same thing when I was about 12. I almost went blind in my right eye because of a glass fragment no one could see." Mrs. Evelyn picked up an old magnifying glass and asked Julian to sit in a chair near the window where the light was better. "It might hurt a little, but I need to open your eye wide to see properly." Carefully, she examined Julian's left eye. After a few minutes of silent observation, she sighed deeply. Maya was right. There is a very tiny fragment stuck to your cornea. It looks like a little piece of clear plastic. It must have been there for years. Julian felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief at finally knowing what was going on, and anger at having spent years consulting expensive doctors who hadn't discovered something so simple. How did this end up in there? It probably happened when you were very young. Could have been an accident with a toy, a fall, anything. The fragment was so small no one noticed at the time. And can it be removed? Yes, but it needs to be done by a doctor. It's delicate. You have to be careful not to hurt the eye. While they were talking, they heard the sound of a car stopping outside. Harrison Sterling had discovered his son's whereabouts and arrived at the mobile home in a state of absolute fury. "Julian!" he shouted, entering without knocking. "What do you think you're doing here?" "Dad, they found out what I have," Julian tried to explain, but Harrison wasn't interested in listening. "You lied to me, disobeyed me, snuck out to come to this place. I'm disappointed in you." Mrs. Evelyn stood up calmly and faced Harrison. "Sir, before you scold the boy, don't you want to know what we found out?" "I don't want to know anything. You're opportunists trying to take advantage of my son. No one here wants anything from you. We just want to help a child who's suffering." "Suffering? My son has the best medical care in the country." "Does he? Then why didn't any of those expensive doctors see this?" Mrs. Evelyn picked up the magnifying glass and showed Harrison Julian's eye. "Look here, right at the corner of the cornea. See this tiny, shiny speck? It's a fragment of something that's been stuck there for years." Harrison stepped closer, annoyed, but when he looked through the magnifying glass, his face completely changed. He could actually see something small and shiny in his son's eye. How did you see this?" "Because we actually looked," answered Maya without fear. "Doctors keep doing complicated tests and forget to look at the basics." Harrison was silent for several minutes, processing the discovery. Years of expensive consultations, sophisticated exams, trips to other states, and 2 simple people living in a mobile home had found the problem in 5 minutes. If this is true, if this really is what's causing Julian's problem, it is, Mrs. Evelyn assured. I had the same thing. I know exactly what it's like. How did you fix it? It took years for someone to see it, but when they did, they removed it in a simple surgery. It was at a public hospital, nothing complicated. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, Harrison looked at his son, who was watching him with a mix of hope and fear. For the first time in years, there was a real possibility that Julian's problem could be solved. All right, said Harrison finally. We'll find a doctor who can examine this properly. Thank you, Dad, Julian smiled, feeling he would finally be taken seriously. Don't thank me yet. First, let's make sure this is true. In the following days, Harrison sought out a different ophthalmologist, this time explaining exactly what Mrs. Evelyn had observed. Dr. Arthur Vance, an experienced doctor who worked in both private clinics and the public system, examined Julian with special attention to the cornea. There really is a foreign body here, the doctor confirmed after a thorough examination. It's very small, almost imperceptible, but it's causing constant irritation that's impairing his vision. How did you discover this? Julian told the whole story, from meeting Maya in the town square to the visit to the mobile home. The doctor listened with interest. Sometimes folk medicine sees things that we doctors miss in the complexity of modern exams. That lady and her granddaughter have an impressive clinical eye. Is it possible to remove it? Asked Harrison. Yes, but it's a delicate surgery. The fragment is in a position that requires great care. We'll run some additional tests before the procedure. During the week of preparation for the surgery, Julian asked his father to visit Mrs. Evelyn and Maya again. This time, Harrison accepted the invitation with less resistance. I wanted to thank you, said Harrison when they arrived at the mobile home, and apologize for how I reacted at our first meeting. There's no need to apologize, replied Mrs. Evelyn. You were protecting your son, it's natural. But you were right, and I should have listened. During this second visit, Julian was fascinated by the difference between his life and Maya's. The mobile home was small, simple, but there was something there that his estate didn't have, a feeling of a true home. Maya showed Julian her drawings, made with simple colored pencils on notebook paper. She drew eyes, many different eyes, with impressive detail. Why do you draw so many eyes? Asked Julian. Because I think they're beautiful. Each eye tells a different story. Yours, for example, has a story of suffering, but also of hope. How so? You suffered a lot from not seeing well, but you never gave up trying. That shows in your gaze. Harrison watched the interaction between the two with growing admiration. Maya had a wisdom and sensitivity he rarely saw in adults, let alone in a 9-year-old child. Maya, do you go to school? Asked Harrison. Yes, I do. I study at the neighborhood public school. It's not fancy like rich kids' schools, but I learn a lot. And what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an eye doctor, like the doctor who's going to operate on Julian. I want to help people who have vision problems. Maya's simplicity and determination touched Harrison deeply. He began to question whether his way of raising Julian was truly offering the boy life's most important experiences. Julian, said Harrison on the way back home, what did you think of Maya and Mrs. Evelyn? I thought they were really cool, Dad. Maya is different from all the people I know. Different how? She's genuine. She says what she thinks, doesn't pretend. And Mrs. Evelyn is very wise. You're right. Maybe we have a lot to learn from them. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. The night before, Julian was nervous, but also excited about the possibility of finally seeing well. Dad, can I ask for something? Of course, son. I'd like Maya and Mrs. Evelyn to come to the hospital with me. Harrison hesitated for a moment. His entire life had been governed by rigid social protocols, where every interaction was calculated and appropriate for his status. Why are they important to you? Because they saw me for real, Dad. Not the rich man's son, not the boy with the thick glasses. They saw me as I really am. That answer made Harrison rethink many things. When was the last time someone had seen Julian as he truly was? When was the last time he himself had seen his son beyond the labels and protections he had created? All right, I'll invite them to come with us. On the day of the surgery, Mrs. Evelyn and Maya arrived at the Metro private hospital wearing their best clothes. Even so, the social difference between them and the sophisticated hospital environment was evident. Julian, however, was radiant to see them. "I'm so glad you came," he said, running to hug Maya. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," replied Maya. "Today you're going to see the world for real for the first time." The surgery lasted 2 hours. It was more complex than the doctor had initially predicted, as the fragment was more adhered to the cornea than the tests had shown. During the wait, Harrison talked at length with Mrs. Evelyn. She told him about her life, about how she raised Maya alone after the girl's mother left, about the hardships and joys of a simple life. "Did you never think to ask for help from people with more resources?" asked Harrison. "Ask how?" "By begging." "No, my son. Dignity isn't for sale. You make do with what you have, and you're happy that way. But wouldn't it be easier if you had more comfort?" "Comfort is good, but it's not everything. Maya is a happy, healthy, smart girl. What more could I want?" Harrison grew thoughtful. His own son, with all the comfort in the world, had been a lonely and frustrated child. Maya, with very little in material terms, radiated joy and confidence. "How did you teach Maya to be so observant?" "I didn't teach her, she was born that way. Since she was tiny, she paid attention to things others didn't see. I just encouraged her to trust her own intuition. Julian has always been very dependent on others to make decisions, because they never let him try. A child needs to make mistakes, needs to discover things for themselves. Otherwise, they feel insecure their whole life." When Dr. Vance finally came out of the operating room, everyone stood up anxiously. "The surgery was a success," the doctor announced, smiling. "We managed to remove the fragment completely. It was a piece of plastic, probably from some toy that broke when he was very small." "How is his vision?" asked Harrison. "He's still under the effects of anesthesia, but the initial tests indicate a significant improvement. We'll have to wait a few days to fully assess, but I'm optimistic." When Julian woke from the anesthesia, the first thing he saw was Maya's face smiling at him. "Hi," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Different," replied Julian, blinking slowly. "It feels like there's less stuff in the way." "The doctor said everything went well." "Maya, thank you for helping me. We help each other, right? That's how it works." In the following days, as Julian's eye recovered from the surgery, his vision progressively improved. In a week, he could go without glasses for long periods. In 2 weeks, he didn't need them anymore. For the first time in his life, Julian saw the world in vibrant colors and sharp detail. Every leaf on the trees, every expression on faces, every nuance of sunlight was a wonderful discovery. "Dad, I never imagined the world was so beautiful," said Julian one afternoon, looking at the garden of the estate. "You're seeing everything clearly now." "I'm seeing everything for the first time. It's like I was born again." Harrison watched his son's transformation with emotion. Julian was more confident, more curious, more willing to explore the world around him. "Dad, can I ask you for something? Anything you want? I want to invite Maya and Mrs. Evelyn for lunch here at our house." Harrison smiled. A few weeks ago, this idea would have shocked him. Now it seemed the most natural thing in the world. "Of course. Let's make a special lunch for them." When Mrs. Evelyn and Maya arrived at the Sterling estate, they were impressed by the size and luxury of the house. But what impressed them most was Julian's genuine joy. "Wow, Julian, what a change!" exclaimed Maya. "Your eyes are shining in a different way." "It's because now I can really see you," replied Julian, smiling. During lunch, the social differences seemed irrelevant. Mrs. Evelyn told funny stories from Maya's childhood. Harrison asked questions about life in the mobile home, and the children made plans for their next get-togethers. "Mrs. Evelyn," said Harrison during dessert, "I'd like to make a proposal." "Go ahead, Mr. Harrison. I want to pay for Maya's education, a good elite private academy where she can develop all the potential she has." Mrs. Evelyn fell silent for a moment, thoughtful. It's a very generous gesture, but I need to be sure this won't change my granddaughter's essence. Maya is special because she is simple, genuine. I'm afraid the environment of a rich school might change that. I understand your concern, said Harrison. What if she continues living with you and I pay for a private school right here in Aspen? That way she doesn't lose her roots. Maya, who had listened to the conversation in silence, finally spoke. Grandma, I want to study at a good school to learn more about medicine, but I don't want to leave our home. If that's the case, I accept, agreed Mrs. Evelyn. But on one condition. What? I want Julian to also come study at the public school a few times a week. He needs to spend time with children from different backgrounds. Harrison was surprised by the proposal, but Julian clapped excitedly. Dad, please. It would be so cool to study with Maya and meet other friends. But Julian, you have private tutors, a personalized education. And still, I didn't learn to see what Maya saw in my eye, argued Julian. Maybe I need to learn things you only learn by spending time with different people. Harrison reflected on his son's words. There was wisdom in those words coming from an 8-year-old who had just discovered sight. All right, agreed Harrison. Let's do a trial. Julian goes to the public school twice a week and Maya goes to the private academy 3 times a week. Mrs. Evelyn smiled, satisfied with the agreement. Now we're talking. This way, both learn from different worlds. In the following months, Julian's life changed completely. At the public school, he discovered the joy of having real friends, children who didn't care about his wealth, but who enjoyed playing, studying, and laughing with him. Maya, in turn, flourished at the private academy. Her natural intelligence found stimulation she had never had before, especially in science classes, where she demonstrated a special talent for observation and analysis. Julian, said Maya one afternoon while they did homework together at the Sterling estate, have you noticed how we see different things now? How so? You're seeing things you never saw at the public school, and I'm learning things at the private academy I never imagined. We're growing. It's true. Before I only knew rich kids, and I thought everyone was like me. And I only knew poor kids. Now I see there are good and bad people everywhere. Harrison, who was listening to the conversation from the doorway, smiled proudly. His son was developing a worldview that he himself had taken decades to acquire. That night, Harrison had an important conversation with Beatrice, who had been reinstated after the discovery about Julian's eye. Beatrice, I want to thank you for supporting Julian when I didn't want to listen. Mr. Harrison, I only did what I thought was right. You always knew there was something different about Julian's problem, didn't you? I always thought it was strange the doctors couldn't improve his vision. A child doesn't lie when they say something is bothering them. Why did you never insist more? Because it wasn't my place to question medical decisions, but when someone appeared with an explanation that made sense, I thought it was worth investigating. Beatrice, I want you to know your opinions are important to me. You know Julian better than I do in many ways. Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. Harrison began to realize how many important voices he had silenced over the years in the name of control and overprotection. 3 months after the surgery, Dr. Vance had the final follow-up appointment with Julian. The recovery is perfect, declared the doctor. Julian's vision is 100% normal now. Doctor, said Julian, can I ask a question? Of course. Why didn't the other doctors ever see the fragment? Dr. Vance thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes, Julian, medicine gets so focused on technology and complex tests that it forgets the basics, to really look at the patient. Your other doctors probably ran dozens of tests, but no one stopped to observe your eye with simple, direct attention. Like Maya and Mrs. Evelyn did. Exactly. They used the best technology there is, careful human observation. Leaving the appointment, Harrison made a decision that surprised even himself. Julian, what if we stopped by the mobile home to share the good news with Mrs. Evelyn and Maya? Really, Dad, that would be great. When they arrived at the mobile home, they found Maya helping her grandmother sew. Mrs. Evelyn had received a large order from a local hotel and was working to deliver it on time. I'm so glad you came, said Maya, running to hug Julian. How was the appointment? The doctor said everything is perfect, replied Julian, beaming. My vision is normal. What wonderful news, exclaimed Mrs. Evelyn. God is so good. It was thanks to you and Maya, said Harrison. If you hadn't seen what you saw, we only did what anyone should do, care for a child who needed help. Harrison looked around the mobile home, simple but organized and clean. There was something there that his estate didn't have, a feeling of a true home, of authentic life. Mrs. Evelyn, may I ask a personal question? Of course. Are you happy living like this? Mrs. Evelyn smiled and looked at Maya, who was embroidering intently by the window. Mr. Harrison, I have my health, I have my granddaughter, I have honest work, I have friends. What more do I need to be happy? But don't you think about having more comfort, a bigger house? I do think about it. It would be nice to have a better bathroom, a bigger kitchen, but I'm not going to be unhappy for not having it now. Happiness doesn't live in a big house, it lives in people's hearts. Julian listened to the conversation and asked a question that surprised everyone. Dad, are you happy in our big house? Harrison was left speechless. He had never questioned himself about it so directly. Why do you ask that, Julian? Because you always seem worried, always working, always talking on the phone about problems. Here in the mobile home, everyone seems more at ease. It's different, son. I have many responsibilities. But does that make you happy? Harrison realized he didn't know how to answer that question. It had been so long since he associated success with happiness that he had never stopped to evaluate if he truly felt good about the life he had built. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Harrison spent hours thinking about the conversation in the mobile home. When he went to sleep, he made a decision that would change the course of his life. The next morning, he called Julian for a talk. Son, what if we changed a few things in our life? What kind of changes? What if I worked less and we spent more time together? And what if we invited Maya and Mrs. Evelyn to be part of our family? Julian was thrilled with the idea. What do you mean, part of our family? Well, I was thinking of offering them a small house on the grounds of our home. That way we're close, but they keep their independence. Dad, that would be amazing. I'll talk to them today. When Harrison made the proposal, Mrs. Evelyn was surprised. Mr. Harrison, that is very generous, but I don't know if we should accept. Why not? Because we don't want anyone to think we're taking advantage of the situation. Mrs. Evelyn, it was you and Maya who saved my son's sight. I am the one indebted to you. We didn't do this expecting a reward. I know. That's precisely why you deserve all the good things life has to offer. Maya, who had been listening to the conversation in silence, finally spoke. Grandma, I would like to accept. Why, my granddaughter? Because then Julian and I can study together every day. And you won't have to worry so much about money for our food and medicine. Mrs. Evelyn sighed, understanding her granddaughter's logic. If it's for Maya's good, I accept. But with conditions. What conditions? Asked Harrison. First, we continue working and paying for our own basic expenses. Second, Maya cannot lose her humility and respect for others. Third, if one day you want us to leave, we leave without any drama. I accept all the conditions, but I am sure the third one will never be necessary. The move happened a month later. Harrison had a small house built at the back of the Sterling estate, with 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen and bathroom. Nothing luxurious, but comfortable and dignified. Maya was delighted with the new house, especially with the room she would have all to herself for the first time in her life. Julian, look at the beautiful view from my window, she said, pointing to the garden that stretched to the main house. Now we can play together every day. And study together, too. The adjustment was easier than everyone expected. Mrs. Evelyn continued sewing, but now had a better space to work. Maya divided her time between the 2 schools and the extra tutoring Harrison had arranged to help prepare her for a future in medicine. Harrison, keeping his promise to work less, began having lunch at home almost every day. It was the time when the 2 families would gather to talk about their day, make plans, and simply enjoy each other's company. Dad, said Julian one such afternoon, can I tell you something? Of course. I've never been so happy in my life. Before, even when my vision improved, I felt alone. Now I feel like part of a real family. Harrison felt a tightness in his heart, but a good tightness. For the first time in years, he too felt part of a real family. You know what's funny, Julian? I've never been so happy either. Why? Because before I worked to get money and status, now I work to take care of the people I love. Mrs. Evelyn, listening from the kitchen, smiled to herself. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing two people discover life's true meaning. 6 months after the surgery, the two families had settled into a harmonious routine. Julian had become an exemplary student at both schools, developing both his intellect and his emotional intelligence. Maya continued to shine academically, but without losing the simplicity that made her special. One morning, Julian woke up with an idea. Maya, remember when you told me you wanted to be an eye doctor? I remember. What if we did a project together? What kind of project? A project to help other children who have vision problems that doctors can't solve. Maya was excited by the idea. How would we do that? We could teach people to observe eyes like you do. Make a manual, give talks. That would be incredible. The idea developed quickly. With the help of Mrs. Evelyn, who knew many families in the area, and the financial support of Harrison, they began visiting public schools, teaching children and teachers how to identify basic vision problems. The project, which they called Eyes That See, started small but soon gained recognition. Several children had been identified with problems that had gone unnoticed, including 3 cases similar to Julian's. Dad, said Julian after one of the lectures, I think I've found what I want to do when I grow up. What is it? I want to be a doctor like Dr. Vance, but I also want to teach people to observe better. I think a lot of suffering can be avoided if people learn to see what's really happening. Harrison smiled, proud of his son's maturity. And I will support you in everything you need to achieve that dream. 1 year after the surgery, Dr. Vance invited Julian and Maya to present the Eyes That See project at a medical conference in New York City. It was a unique opportunity to show specialists from across the country the importance of simple, direct observation. Will I really be able to speak in front of all those important doctors? Asked Maya, nervous. Yes, you will, encouraged Julian. Remember you had the courage to talk to my dad when he was angry. This will be easy compared to that. That's true, laughed Maya. And besides, we're talking about something we really understand. The presentation was an absolute success. Julian told his personal story, Maya explained her observation technique, and together they demonstrated how to examine eyes in a simple yet effective way. Many doctors approached them after the presentation, interested in learning more and implementing the techniques in their clinics. You too have opened my eyes to something I had forgotten, said an ophthalmologist from Washington, D.C. Sometimes technology makes us forget the obvious. That's exactly right, agreed another doctor. You reminded us that good medicine begins with careful observation. Back in Aspen, the two families celebrated the success of the presentation with a special lunch in the garden of the Sterling estate. Who would have thought that meeting in the town square would result in all this, said Harrison, watching Julian and Maya planning the next phase of the project. Life is funny that way, replied Mrs. Evelyn. You plant a tiny seed of kindness and harvest a whole tree. You're right. Julian not only regained his physical sight, he developed a completely different vision of life. And Maya, too. She always wanted to help people. Now she has the chance to do it on a larger scale. Harrison reflected on everything that had changed in his life. A year ago, he was a man focused only on accumulating wealth and status. Today, his greatest joy came from seeing the growth and happiness of the people he loved. Mrs. Evelyn, can I confess something to you? Of course. It took me 45 years to learn what you already knew, that true wealth lies in human relationships. It's never too late to learn, Mr. Harrison. The important thing is that you learned. That night, as Julian and Maya studied together in the living room, Harrison made another decision that would change their lives. Julian, how would you feel if I sold part of the company and we traveled across the country, implementing the Eyes That See project? Julian stopped studying and looked at his father with shining eyes. Dad, that would be a dream. And you, Maya, what do you think? I think it would be incredible to be able to help children across the whole country. Then it's decided. We'll turn this into a national project. Mrs. Evelyn, who was listening from the kitchen, smiled contentedly. Her father-in-law used to say that God works in mysterious ways, and she was seeing living proof of that. 2 years had passed since Julian's surgery. The Eyes That See project had already been implemented in 12 states, helping hundreds of children identify vision problems that had gone unnoticed. Julian, now 10 years old, had become a confident and determined young man. His experience with near blindness made him especially empathetic toward other children facing similar difficulties. Maya, at 11 years old, already demonstrated knowledge in ophthalmology that impressed professional doctors. She had developed her own visual examination technique that was being studied at universities. "Maya," said Julian one afternoon, "do you remember what you told me on the first day we met? That you had something shining in your eye?" "No, after that." "You said you could see stories in people's eyes." "Yes, I remember." "What do you see in my eyes now?" Maya looked carefully at Julian, as she always did when someone asked that question. "I see joy, Julian. I see a boy who suffered but turned that suffering into a desire to help others. And I see a bright future ahead." "And in your own eyes, what do you see?" "In mine?" Maya laughed. "I see a girl who found her life's mission very early. I see determination and gratitude." "Gratitude for what?" "For having found you and your family, for having the chance to study, for being able to help people, for having a life I never imagined was possible." Harrison, who was passing through the hallway, stopped to listen to the conversation. He still got emotional when he heard the children talk about the impact they had on each other's lives. "Children," he said, entering the room, "I have news for you." "What news, Dad?" "The Department of Health Services wants to officially recognize the Eyes That See project. We're going to receive government support to expand it across the country." Julian and Maya looked at each other, incredulous. "Does that mean we'll be able to help children in every state?" asked Maya. "It means that, and much more. It means you've created something that will make a difference in the lives of thousands of American children." That evening, the two families gathered to talk about this extraordinary achievement. It was hard to believe it had all started with a chance meeting in a town square. "Mrs. Evelyn," said Harrison, "you were right when you said we planted a little seed of kindness." "The seed was good, Mr. Harrison. That's why the tree grew strong and beautiful." "What was the seed?" "Maya's courage to speak the truth, and your humility to accept you were wrong." "And Julian? What was his part?" "Julian had the courage to seek the truth, even when it meant disobeying, and later he had the wisdom to turn his healing into a mission to help others." Julian, who was listening quietly, finally spoke. "You know what I've learned these 2 years?" "What, son?" asked Harrison. "I've learned that sometimes you need to go blind to learn how to truly see." The depth of the observation left everyone silent for a moment. "What do you mean, Julian?" asked Maya. "When I couldn't see well physically, I also didn't truly see people. I only saw wealth, poverty, social differences. After my vision improved, I learned to see people's hearts." Mrs. Evelyn nodded, admiring the boy's maturity. "That's why you two will be special doctors in the future. You won't just treat patients' eyes, you'll teach them to see the world differently." 3 years had passed since that afternoon in the town square that changed everything. The Eyes That See project had become a national public health program, training professionals across the country. Julian, now 11, and Maya, 12, had become nationally recognized young speakers. Their stories inspired not only children with vision problems, but anyone facing challenges in life. The Sterling estate had transformed into a kind of informal research center where ophthalmologists, educators, and researchers came to learn the techniques developed by the children. "Dad," Julian said one morning, "I've been thinking a lot about our future." "What kind of thoughts?" "I want us to turn our home into a real institute, a place where kids like me and Maya can come to study and develop projects to help other people." Harrison was surprised by the maturity of the proposal. Would it be like a different kind of school? It would be like a school that teaches kids to see problems and create solutions. A school that shapes people who want to make a difference in the world. And where did you get this idea? Talking with Maya, we realized our story isn't special just because of the problem with my eye. It's special because it shows how different people can come together to solve problems. Maya joined the conversation excitedly. Mr. Harrison, imagine how many kids like us there are in the country, kids who have good ideas but don't have the opportunity to develop them. And imagine how many problems could be solved if those kids worked together, Julian added. Harrison was moved by the vision of the two young people. They weren't thinking only about their own careers, but about how to use their experiences to multiply opportunities for other children. Have you talked with Mrs. Evelyn about this idea yet? Not yet, Maya replied, but I'm sure she'll support it. When the idea was presented to Mrs. Evelyn, she was thoughtful for a long time before answering. It's a beautiful idea, she said finally. But are you sure you're ready for such a big responsibility? We're not thinking of doing everything by ourselves, Grandma, Maya explained. We want adult experts to help us. We'd be like young consultants. And we also want the kids who come to study here to keep being normal kids, Julian added. No pressure, no obligation, just the chance to explore ideas and see if they can help someone. Mrs. Evelyn smiled, recognizing the wisdom behind the proposal. If you promise you'll keep being happy children, I support it. We promise, they said in unison. The creation of the Eyes That See Institute took a year to materialize. Harrison invested a considerable portion of his fortune in the project, but also secured support from other companies and the government. The institute was built on an area adjacent to the Sterling estate, with classrooms, simple laboratories, a library, and common areas. The concept was revolutionary. Children of different ages and social backgrounds worked together on real projects to solve community problems. Julian and Maya, now 12 and 13, became the Institute's first junior ambassadors. They helped select new students, participated in planning the activities, and shared their experiences with the newcomers. Maya, Julian said on the day of the Institute's inauguration, do you remember when they asked me if I thought all this would work out? I remember. You said yes because we had learned that hard problems sometimes have simple solutions. And I was right. Who would have thought a girl observing an eye would result in all this? You know what's most amazing, Julian? What? That we've barely begun. Imagine how many other kids will come study here and discover even more important things. The inauguration of the Eyes That See Institute was covered by the national press. The story of Julian and Maya had become a symbol of how cooperation between people from different backgrounds can generate extraordinary transformations. During the ceremony, Dr. Vance, who had become the Institute's medical advisor, gave an emotional speech. 4 years ago, I removed a small fragment from a child's eye. It was a simple procedure lasting 2 hours, but the results of that surgery continue to multiply to this day. Julian not only regained his physical sight, he developed a worldview that is transforming the lives of thousands of other children. When it was Julian's turn to speak, he took the stage with the confidence of someone who had overcome much more than vision problems. 4 years ago, I couldn't even see my own nose clearly, began Julian, drawing laughter from the audience. Today, I can see possibilities I never imagined existed. This happened because a girl had the courage to tell me the truth, because my father had the humility to accept he was wrong, and because we all learned that the best solutions are born when different people work together. The audience was moved by the boy's words. Many adults present recognized they had much to learn from those two extraordinary children. Maya spoke next, and her presentation was equally touching. I always knew I wanted to help people, she said, but I never imagined it would be possible on such a large scale. The Eyes That See Institute isn't just about physical vision. It's about teaching people to see each other with respect, curiosity, and a willingness to help. It's about showing that a child can also make a difference in the world as long as they have support and opportunity. After the ceremony, the two families gathered for an intimate dinner. It was a time to celebrate, but also to reflect on everything that had changed in their lives. Harrison, said Mrs. Evelyn, do you remember what you said the first day we met? Unfortunately, I remember well. I said terrible things to you. You said we were opportunists. At the time, it hurt deeply to hear that. Mrs. Evelyn, Let me finish, she interrupted with a smile. "It hurt at the time, but today I understand you were protecting your son the only way you knew how, and in the end, we were the ones who took advantage of the situation." "How so?" "We gained a family, opportunities we never imagined, the chance to see Maya grow up with endless possibilities. We were the ones who took advantage in the best possible sense." Harrison was moved by the words of the woman who had become a second mother to him. "The truth, Mrs. Evelyn, is that we all took advantage of each other in the best sense. You taught us what really matters in life. And you showed us that true generosity doesn't humiliate, it uplifts," she replied. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Julian stood at his bedroom window looking at the small mobile home where Maya and Mrs. Evelyn lived. The lights were on, and he could see their silhouettes talking in the living room. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 4 years had passed, but Julian still felt emotional, remembering how his life had completely changed. From a lonely boy limited by vision problems, he had become a confident young man with a clear purpose and true friendships. But the greatest transformation hadn't been in his physical sight. It had been in his ability to see people beyond appearances, to value qualities that are priceless, and to understand that true happiness came from making a difference in the lives of others. The next morning, Julian woke with a strange feeling. It was as if something important was about to happen. When he went down for breakfast, he found Maya already awake, with the same thoughtful expression. "Good morning, Maya. Did you also wake up with a strange feeling?" "I did. It feels like today is going to be a special day." "Special how?" "I can't explain it, it's just a feeling." Harrison arrived in the kitchen at that moment, holding an official letter. "Kids, you won't believe what just arrived." "What is it, Dad?" "A letter from the Global Health Alliance. They want the Eyes That See project to be presented at the World Assembly in Geneva." Julian and Maya exchanged a look, incredulous. "Does this mean our project could be implemented in other countries?" asked Maya. "It means that and much more. It means you've created something that can help children all over the world." The news was so extraordinary that it took them a few moments to fully process it. A project that had started in a town square in Aspen could now benefit children on every continent. "Dad, are we really going to present to people from all over the world?" asked Julian, still processing the information. "Yes, you are. The letter says they specifically want the two of you to present the project in person." Mrs. Evelyn, who had arrived for breakfast, overheard the conversation and sat down in a chair, amazed. Good heavens! Who would have thought 2 kids from Aspen would speak to the whole world? "Grandma, are you coming with us to Geneva?" Maya asked immediately. "Me? Sweetheart, I've never left the country in my life." "Then it's time to see the world," said Harrison, smiling. "Obviously, we're all going together." The preparations for the trip to Geneva took 2 months. Julian and Maya had to learn about international protocols, prepare presentations in English, and study cases of vision problems in different countries. During this period, they received visits from several international specialists who came to the country to see the institute and better understand the methodology developed by the children. "It's impressive how you managed to systematize something so intuitive," said an ophthalmologist from Finland. "In Europe, we have very advanced technology, but we've lost that capacity for simple, direct observation." "Technology is important," Maya replied, "but it can't replace human care." "Exactly," Julian agreed. "Our project isn't against technology. It's to remind us that it should serve people, not the other way around." 1 month before the trip, something unexpected happened. A German television network produced a documentary about Julian and Maya's story, which aired in several European countries. The documentary told the whole journey, from the meeting in the town square to the creation of the institute. The response was extraordinary, and letters from children all over the world began arriving at the institute. One letter in particular moved Julian deeply. It was from a 10-year-old Swedish boy who had vision problems similar to the ones he had faced. "Dear Julian," the boy wrote, "I saw your story on television and wanted to tell you that you gave me hope. The doctors here can't figure out what I have either, but now I'm going to ask them to look at my eyes the way Maya looked at yours. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the solutions are simpler than we think. Julian was so moved by the letter that he decided to reply personally, also sending a basic observation manual that he and Maya had developed. Maya, Julian said after replying to the letter, do you realize how our story is reaching places we never imagined? I do. And you know what's most amazing? Every person our story touches is going to touch other people too. It's like we're creating a network of mutual help. How so? Think about it. This Swedish boy is going to improve his vision because of our story. When he grows up, how many other people will he help because of that experience? And so on. The depth of Maya's reflection impressed Julian. At 13, she was already thinking about long-term impacts and multiplier effects that many adults couldn't visualize. The trip to Geneva was a transformative experience for the whole family. It was the first time Mrs. Evelyn had left the United States, and her excitement at seeing other countries and cultures was contagious. Maya, she said on the plane, I never imagined I'd live to see the world out there. How are you feeling, Grandma? Proud. Proud of you, of Julian, of everything you've built, but also grateful to have lived long enough to see this. You're going to live much longer to see everything we're still going to do, Maya assured her, hugging her grandmother. The presentation at the Global Health Alliance was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The auditorium was full of delegates from countries all over the world, public health experts, and representatives of international organizations. Julian opened the presentation by telling his personal story, from the first symptoms to the successful surgery. He spoke naturally, without dramatization, but with the conviction of someone who had lived every moment of that experience. For years I thought my problem was too complex to be solved, he said. I saw dozens of doctors, had hundreds of tests, used stronger and stronger glasses, but no one had simply looked at my eye with basic, careful attention. Maya continued the presentation, explaining her observation technique and how it had been systematized to be taught to others. What I did wasn't magic, she explained. It was patient and careful observation. Anyone can learn to do this, provided they have proper training and the willingness to truly see what's in front of them. Together, they demonstrated the technique with volunteers from the assembly itself, identifying minor problems that had gone unnoticed in conventional medical exams. The presentation was met with a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Delegates from several countries immediately approached to discuss implementing the project in their territories. You have reminded us of something fundamental, said the delegate from Japan. In the race for technological innovation, we've forgotten that the most effective medicine is often the simplest. We would like to implement this project in all public schools in France, declared the French representative. Can you help us with the training? Of course, replied Julian. Our institute exists precisely to multiply these techniques. In the days following the presentation, Julian and Maya participated in meetings with delegations from 15 different countries. Each meeting resulted in agreements to implement the Eyes That See project in different cultural contexts. Dad, Julian said one of those evenings, can you believe our story has come this far? I can't, confessed Harrison, but at the same time, it makes perfect sense. You've created something universal, the importance of truly seeing and caring for one another. You know what I hope, said Maya. What? Asked both men. I hope that in a few years there are thousands of children all over the world who have learned to observe and help other children. Imagine how many problems can be solved that way. The trip back to the United States was marked by much reflection. In 1 week, their lives had changed again. From a local project, they had become responsible for a global initiative. Are you prepared for this responsibility? Harrison asked during the flight. I don't think anyone is prepared for changes this big, replied Julian. But if we've managed to get this far, we can go further too. And besides, we're not alone, added Maya. There are plenty of good people helping us. Mrs. Evelyn, who had been quiet for most of the return trip, finally spoke. Kids, can I give some grandmotherly advice? Of course, Grandma. Always remember where you came from. No matter how far you go, don't forget that it all started with 2 children helping each other in a simple town square of a small town. We'll never forget, promised Julian. Never, agreed Maya. Back in Aspen, they found the institute running perfectly under the coordination of the educators Julian and Harrison had hired. Dozens of children of different ages worked on various projects, from solutions for health problems to ideas for improving life in their communities. How was Europe? The children asked, eager to hear about the trip. Julian and Maya spent hours recounting the experience, showing photos and explaining how the project would be implemented in other countries. "Does that mean you'll travel a lot?" asked Chloe, a 9-year-old student. "We'll travel when necessary," answered Maya, "but our place is here with you. This institute is our home, and you are our family." In the following months, life at the institute intensified. Teams from different countries came regularly to learn the methodology, and Julian and Maya traveled sporadically to supervise implementations on other continents. But they kept the promise made to the other children at the institute. They never let international responsibilities interfere with their daily life, with their American friends. "Maya," said Julian one afternoon, while helping a group of younger children with a project on medicinal plants, "do you have any regrets about everything that happened?" "Regrets? None. And you?" "None either. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if you hadn't spoken to me that afternoon in the town square." "It would have been a good life anyway," said Maya thoughtfully. "You would have found other ways to be happy, but maybe it would have taken longer. And your life? What would it have been like?" "Different, but not necessarily worse. Maybe I would have become a doctor anyway. It just would have taken me longer to get there." "Why do you think that?" "Because good people find ways to do good things. We just got lucky to find those ways sooner." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Vance, who arrived at the institute for his weekly visit. He had become not only a medical consultant, but also a kind of mentor to the children. "How are my favorite young ophthalmologists?" he asked, smiling. "We're well, doctor," replied Julian. "How are the results from the new cases we identified?" "Excellent. Of the 15 children you referred last month, 12 actually had problems that had gone unnoticed, an 80% success rate. And the other 3? They were emotional problems manifesting through physical symptoms, also important to identify, just requiring a different type of treatment." Maya became interested in this information. "Doctor, does that mean sometimes vision problems aren't just physical?" "Exactly. Stress, anxiety, childhood depression, they can all cause visual symptoms. That's why your careful observation is so valuable. You don't just look at the physical eye, you look at the whole child." "How so?" asked Julian. "You observe how the child behaves, how they talk about the problem, how they interact with their parents. That gives clues about whether the problem is physical, emotional, or a combination of both." This discovery opened a new dimension in Julian and Maya's work. They also began studying child psychology, learning to identify signs of emotional problems that could be affecting the children's vision. "You know what's interesting?" Maya commented to Julian a few weeks later. "Our project started out being about eyes, but it's becoming about whole children. It's true. We're learning that you can't separate the physical from the emotional." "Exactly. And that goes for us too. My vision improved when I stopped worrying about what others would think of me." "How so?" "When I told you in the town square about your eye, I was nervous because I knew your father would be angry. But I decided to speak up anyway because I thought it was the right thing to do. And how did that change your perspective? It taught me that when we do what we think is right, even when we're afraid, we see the world more clearly." Julian was impressed by the depth of his friend's reflection. "Maya, have you always been like this, so thoughtful?" "I've always been observant. But talking with you, with your father, with my grandma, with all the people we've met, taught me to organize my thoughts better. You've taught me a lot too." "What, for example?" "You taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid." This conversation happened on a Friday afternoon while they were organizing the Institute's library. The next day, Saturday, they would receive a visit from a delegation from Mexico interested in implementing the project in rural Mexican schools. "Julian, Maya," called Harrison, entering the library. "The Mexican delegation arrived early. Can you come greet them?" The two stood up immediately. Over the last 2 years, they had grown accustomed to receiving visitors from all over the world, but they still felt moved by each new opportunity to expand the project. The Mexican delegation consisted of 3 educators and 2 doctors. They had flown from Mexico specifically to see the institute and learn the methodology developed by the children. "It's an honor to meet you," said Dr. Sarah Jenkins, the delegation leader. "Your techniques could revolutionize children's healthcare in our region." "What kind of problems do you face in Mexico?" asked Maya. "We have many rural communities where access to ophthalmologists is limited. Children grow up with undiagnosed vision problems because there are no specialists nearby." "That's exactly the type of situation our project can help with," said Julian. "Teachers and parents can be trained to do the initial screening." Over the next 3 days, the Mexican delegation participated in all the institute's activities. They observed classes, took part in hands-on training, and accompanied Julian and Maya during checkups for local children. "What impresses us most," commented Dr. Michael Thorne on the last day, "isn't just the effectiveness of the technique, but how you've maintained the simplicity and humanity of the process." "How so?" asked Mrs. Evelyn, who was part of the conversation. "Often when techniques are systematized, they lose the human element that made them special. You've managed to keep the essence of personal care while creating a method that can be taught on a large scale." "That's thanks to Mrs. Evelyn," said Maya. "She always reminds us that technique without kindness doesn't work." "It's true," agreed the grandmother. "Method is important, but the heart has to be in the right place." When the Mexican delegation departed, taking with them all the material needed to implement the project in their communities, Julian and Maya once again felt that sense of mission accomplished. "Another country," said Julian, watching the plane take off. "How many is that now?" "I think we've lost count," laughed Maya. "But each one is special." "Why?" "Because each country has its own challenges, its own culture, its own way of caring for children. Our project adapts to each place, but the essence remains the same." "What is the essence?" "People caring for people." That evening, the 2 families gathered for the Saturday dinner, a tradition they maintained religiously, no matter how many international visitors they were hosting. "Kids," said Harrison during dessert, "have you thought about what you want to do when you finish your basic studies?" "We want to continue what we're already doing," Julian replied without hesitation. "But on a deeper level," added Maya. "We want to study real medicine to better understand how the body works. And we also want to study education," said Julian, "to better teach the people who will apply our method." "Have you already decided where you want to study?" "We were thinking of studying right here in the US, said Maya. "Maybe at Columbia or Stanford. Why not at an international university? You would have guaranteed access to the best universities in the world." "Because our work is here," explained Julian. "We can learn from teachers anywhere, but our mission is with American children." "Besides," added Maya, "all those international universities now send students here to learn from us. Why not learn right here?" The children's logic was irrefutable. In just 4 years, they had transformed Aspen into an international reference center for children's public health. "You're right," agreed Harrison. "Sometimes the best opportunities are closer than we imagine." "Like the fragment in Julian's eye," said Mrs. Evelyn. "The solution was right there, it just needed someone who knew how to look." This comparison made everyone laugh, but it also brought back the memory of that afternoon that changed their lives forever. "Do you 2 know what I admire most about you?" said Harrison. "What?" asked Julian and Maya. "You never forgot where you came from, or how it all began. Even with all the international recognition, you're still the same children who met in a town square." "It's because we learned that success doesn't change who we are," said Julian. "It just gives us more opportunities to help other people." "And helping people has always been our goal," completed Maya. "The rest is a consequence." 5 years had passed since that decisive afternoon in the square. The Eyes That See Institute had become a global reference. The project was implemented in 42 countries, and thousands of children had already benefited from the methodology developed by Julian and Maya. But for the 2 families living in the estate and the little house in the back in Aspen, the most important thing wasn't the impressive numbers or the international recognition. It was the certainty that they had built something lasting, based on solid values and genuine love. "Dad," said Julian on a Sunday morning, "can I confess something?" "Of course, son. Sometimes I think about what my life would be like if I hadn't had a vision problem. And how do you think it would be? Probably I'd be a spoiled rich kid who wouldn't understand anything about real life." Harrison laughed, but also reflected on his son's words. "Do you think it was good to have gone through that difficulty?" "I think it was necessary. It taught me to value things I would never have valued otherwise." "What things?" "True friendship, family, the ability to help other people. If I had always seen well, maybe I never would have learned to truly see." This reflection from Julian touched Harrison deeply. His son had transformed a physical limitation into an extraordinary emotional and spiritual strength. "Julian, you know I'm very proud of you." "I know, Dad, and I'm very proud of you too." "Why?" "Because you had the courage to change. It's not easy for an adult to admit they were wrong and start over differently." "It was the best decision I ever made in my life." That afternoon, while Julian and Maya worked with a group of new children who had arrived at the Institute, Mrs. Evelyn and Harrison talked in the garden. "Harrison," she said, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Are you happy now?" Harrison thought for a few moments before answering. "I'm happier than I ever imagined possible." "And you?" "Me too. You know why?" "Why?" "Because we learned that happiness isn't about what we have, but what we do with what we have." "Did you always know that?" "I always sensed it, but living with you taught me to put it into practice more consciously." "How so?" "Before, I accepted my simple life, but I didn't know I could use that simplicity to teach important things to other people. You showed me that every experience can be valuable if it's shared the right way." Harrison nodded, deeply understanding what she meant. "Mrs. Evelyn, have you ever thought about writing a book about everything we've lived?" "Me? Write a book?" she laughed. "Harrison, I barely finished elementary school. But you have wisdom worth more than any diploma. Your reflections helped shape two children who are changing the world. If I ever write anything, it will be a letter to other grandmothers raising grandchildren alone, to say that no matter what we don't have, it's always possible to give love and teach good values. That would be an important letter." "It would. But for now, I'd rather spend my energy taking care of Maya and helping the children at the Institute." "You're right. Action is worth more than words." While the adults talked, Julian and Maya were discovering something new about one of the children who had recently arrived at the Institute. Leo, a 7-year-old boy, had been brought by his parents because he showed symptoms similar to what Julian had faced. But during the initial observation, Maya noticed something different. "Julian, come see this," she called. "What did you notice?" "Leo doesn't have a foreign body in his eye. His problem is something else." "How do you know?" "Look at the way he blinks. It's different from your pattern. And when he looks at things, it's not just his left eye that strains more." Julian carefully observed Leo's behavior. Maya was right. The pattern was completely different from what he had experienced. "What kind of problem do you think it is?" "I need to observe more, but it seems like something related to the coordination between the two eyes." Over the following week, Maya observed Leo in different activities. She noticed he had difficulty estimating distances, stumbled frequently, and avoided activities that required hand-eye coordination. "Dr. Vance," she said during the doctor's weekly visit, "I think Leo has a depth perception problem." "What makes you think that?" "He can't properly calculate the distance of objects, and when he draws, he always puts everything on the same plane, with no perspective." Dr. Vance examined Leo based on Maya's observations and confirmed the diagnosis. "Maya, you're right, it's a stereopsis problem. Leo's eyes don't work together properly to create depth perception. Is it treatable? Yes, with specific exercises and sometimes special glasses. But it's a type of problem that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't affect basic vision." Julian was impressed by his friend's observational skill. "Maya, how did you manage to see that?" "By paying attention not just to the eyes, but to how he uses his eyes in daily activities." "Does that mean our method is evolving?" It is. We're learning to see more subtle patterns, more complex problems. This discovery marked a new phase in Julian and Maya's work. They began developing techniques to identify not just foreign bodies in eyes, but a much wider range of visual and neurological related problems. "Kids," Harrison said one evening, "do you realize you're becoming experts in a field that didn't even exist before?" "How so?" asked Julian. "You're creating a new discipline, visual diagnosis through behavioral observation. It's something between medicine, psychology, and education." "That's true," Maya agreed. "We're learning things that aren't in the medical textbooks." "Because you're writing the textbooks," said Mrs. Evelyn proudly. "You're pioneers in a new science." This perspective gave a new dimension to the children's work. They weren't just applying existing knowledge, but creating new knowledge based on their practical experiences. "Dad," said Julian, "I think when we go to university we'll have to study several different fields." "Which fields?" "Medicine, psychology, education, maybe even neuroscience." "Why so many?" "Because each field teaches a different way of observing and understanding people. To do our work well, we need all those perspectives." Harrison was impressed by his son's mature analysis. At 13, Julian was already thinking like a multidisciplinary researcher. "And you, Maya? Do you also want to study all those fields?" "I do, but I also want to study something that doesn't exist yet." "What would that be?" "A field that teaches people to develop intuition in a scientific way." "How so?" "We use intuition a lot in our work. We see things we can't explain rationally, but which turn out to be correct. I want to understand how that works." Maya's perspective opened a fascinating discussion about the relationship between intuition and science, empirical observation, and formal knowledge. "You know what I think," said Dr. Vance, who had arrived during the conversation. "You're rediscovering something medicine lost over the years." "What would that be?" they all asked. "The art of clinical diagnosis. Before modern technology, doctors depended mainly on careful observation and trained intuition. You're showing that these skills remain fundamental." "So we're not inventing something new?" asked Julian. "You're rescuing something old and combining it with modern knowledge. That's what makes your work so revolutionary." This understanding gave Julian and Maya new confidence in their work. They were connected to an ancient medical tradition, but also creating something innovative for the future. "Dr. Vance," said Maya, "can you teach us more about this history of medicine?" "I can and I will. I think you'll be very interested in doctors like Hippocrates, who based their diagnoses mainly on observing the patient as a whole person." In the following months, Julian and Maya began studying the history of medicine alongside their other subjects. They discovered that many of the greatest medical advances in history came from professionals who combined technical knowledge with careful human observation. "It's amazing how history repeats itself," commented Julian after reading about 19th century doctors who made accurate diagnoses just by observing their patients. "It doesn't repeat," corrected Maya. "It evolves in a spiral. We're at a higher level but using similar principles." "How so?" "Those old doctors only had observation. We have observation plus all modern scientific knowledge. It's a more powerful combination." This synthesis between tradition and innovation became the core of the educational philosophy of the Eyes That See Institute. The children learned both ancient observation techniques and the latest advances in neuroscience and medicine. "Maya," said a new 9-year-old student, "how do we know if our intuition is right or wrong?" "By testing it," Maya answered simply. "We observe, form a hypothesis, test it carefully, and see if we were right. And if we were wrong. Learn from the mistake and try again. The important thing is to never stop observing and questioning." Julian watched these interactions with admiration. Maya had developed a natural teaching ability that went far beyond her chronological age. "Maya," he said later, "have you ever thought about being a teacher as well as a doctor?" "Already. I think one thing doesn't exclude the other. The best doctors are also teachers, right?" "How so?" "They teach patients to understand their own bodies. They teach other doctors. They teach students. Medicine is a teaching profession." Once again, Julian was impressed by the depth of his friend's reflection. 6 years had passed since the meeting in the town square. Julian was 14, Maya was 15, and both already demonstrated an intellectual and emotional maturity that impressed specialized adults. The Eyes That See Institute had received recognition from international organizations, including a UNESCO award for innovative educational projects. But for Julian and Maya, the most important recognition came from the letters they received from children who had been helped by their method. "Julian," said Maya one afternoon, showing a stack of letters, 30 more letters arrived this week. "From where?" "From all over the world. There's one here from a girl in Nigeria who managed to identify a problem in her younger brother using our technique." "And this one?" "From a boy in Canada who had the same problem as you. He's already had surgery and is doing well." Julian read the letters with emotion. Each story represented a transformed life, a family that had found hope. "You know what this means, Maya." "What?" "That our story has multiplied thousands of times. Every child we helped can help other children. It's the ripple effect we always wanted to create." "Exactly. And the most beautiful part is that each story is unique, but they all have the same essence." "What essence?" "People caring about people." That night, during the family dinner, Harrison made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "What proposal?" asked the children. "How about we organize an international gathering here at the Institute, an event where children from all the countries that have implemented our project can meet and exchange experiences?" Julian and Maya looked at each other, excited by the idea. "That would be amazing," exclaimed Maya. "Imagine how many different stories we'll get to know." "And how many new things we'll learn," added Julian. "Each country must have developed interesting adaptations of our method." "Exactly," agreed Harrison. "You've created a worldwide network without even knowing it. It's time to connect all the dots." The organization of the first International Eyes That See gathering took 6 months. Children from 42 countries were invited, along with their guardians and the professionals coordinating the local projects. "Dad," said Julian during the preparations, "are you sure Aspen can handle so many people?" "I am. I've already spoken with the city council, hotels, inns. The entire town is going to participate in the event." "How so?" "Many families have offered to host visitors in their homes. Restaurants will prepare typical foods from different countries. Schools will put on cultural presentations." "This is incredible," said Maya. "Our town has gone international because of the project." "Actually," corrected Mrs. Evelyn, "our town was always special. The project just gave it a chance to show that to the world." When the event finally happened, the transformation of Aspen was spectacular. The small mountain town welcomed 300 children from every continent, along with their chaperones. At the opening ceremony, held in the town square where it had all begun, Julian and Maya told their story again to an international audience. "6 years ago," began Julian, "I was here in this same square frustrated because I couldn't see the world around me clearly." "And I was here," continued Maya, "being a curious girl who liked to observe people's eyes. None of us imagined that this chance meeting would result in a worldwide network of children helping other children. But perhaps it was inevitable," said Maya, "because when you plant seeds of kindness, they always find ways to grow." The audience, made up of children of diverse ages, cultures, and languages, applauded enthusiastically. Even those who didn't speak Portuguese could understand the emotion and sincerity of the words. During the 5 days of the event, extraordinary stories were shared. A girl from Kenya told how she had identified vision problems caused by nutritional deficiencies in her community. A boy from Mongolia developed adaptations of the method to work in regions where natural light is limited during the winter. "It's incredible how the same basic principle can be applied in such different ways," Julian commented to Maya during one of the breaks. "It's because each place has its specific needs, but the human essence is universal." "What essence?" "The need to care and be cared for." One of the most moving presentations was given by Maria, a 12-year-old girl from Peru who had modified the technique to identify not only vision problems, but also signs of domestic violence in children at her school. "How did you think of that?" asked Maya during the Q&A session. "I noticed that children who suffered violence at home had specific patterns in their eyes," explained Maria. They couldn't maintain eye contact, blinked excessively when talking about family, things like that. And what did you do with this discovery? I trained teachers to recognize these signs and refer the children for professional help. Julian was deeply moved by Maria's story. You saved lives, he said, literally. You two taught me that observing carefully can change the world. I just applied the principle in a different situation. This interaction exemplified what the entire gathering was about. Children who had learned to observe and care for one another, developing creative solutions for the specific problems of their communities. Maya, said Harrison on the last night of the event, do you and Julian realize what you've created? An international mess, Maya joked. You've created a generation of children who believe they can make a difference in the world, and more importantly, who know how to do it. How so? Look around. There are 300 children here who are returning to their countries knowing they can observe problems, create solutions, and implement changes. You've planted a quiet revolution. Julian looked around, seeing children from different countries talking animatedly, exchanging contacts, making plans for collaborative projects. Dad, this is bigger than anything I imagined when I was little. And it will get even bigger. These children will grow up, they will become adults, and they will continue applying these principles in their professional lives. You mean our project will last for generations? I mean you've changed the way an entire generation thinks about social responsibility and mutual care. At the closing ceremony, the participating children signed a manifesto they had drafted themselves during the event. The document, written in 15 different languages, established basic principles for a worldwide network of young observers and problem solvers. We, the children of 42 countries, pledge to observe the world around us with careful eyes and an open heart, read the first paragraph of the manifesto. We promise to use our capacity for observation to identify problems in our communities and our creativity to develop practical and humane solutions. When Maya read the manifesto aloud, many adults in the audience had tears in their eyes. Grandma, said Maya to Mrs. Evelyn after the ceremony, do you believe in everything that's happening? I do, my dear. And do you know why? Why? Because you never forgot that all of this began with one child caring for another. As long as you don't lose that simplicity, you can do anything. End of story. Tell us what you've thought of this moving story and where you're following us from. If something touched your heart, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Julian and Maya made the right decisions in turning a personal experience into a life's mission? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company up to this point.